From the Lincoln Journal-Star, this is the Life in the Red podcast with Luke Mullin and Amie Just.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Life in the Red podcast. I'm Luke, she's Amie, here to talk some Nebraska football as always with all of you. Hey, we made it back in one piece from West Lafayette, so there's a success.
For once, We're not scarred from our trip to Purdue.
Hey, got to see scenic West Lafayette. I love it there. Nice little college town. The golf cart ride from the media lot to the stadium. That's always
I'm glad we avoided the rain.
Yes, yeah. A lot of rain there before, after, but not during the game. Just a little bit.
Just a tiny, tiny bit. Look, I like Purdue in that it's a Coke school. No free shout outs, but love when I can get some Coke Zero in the press box.
Yeah, no complaints, definitely. But good to be back from that road trip, Nebraska football at home this week. We'll get into that action here in a moment, starting with our weekly update around Husker sports. The Nebraska soccer team, they managed to break their losing skid. A 1-0 win over Illinois last week. Sarah Weber scored that goal in the 58th minute, but did follow that up with a 1-0 loss to a ranked Penn State team. So very good team that they lost to. And the Huskers, they are at Wisconsin this Sunday. Also big news in volleyball. The Nebraska opened up Big Ten play, wins over UCLA and USC. We'll break all that down when we return with Brent Wagner here in a week. But Allie Batenhorst coming back, that was a really special moment to watch.
Yeah, and there's a reason why I wanted to rush back on Sunday morning because I wanted to be there for that. It was really special.
Yeah, had to watch on TV, had to drink that moment in. It was good to see all those friends. I saw that they posted like a TikTok together too. I'm like, that's classic. Good to see all those folks back together, and we'll break that down here next week. But a lot to talk about this Purdue game. So let's get into it. I think everybody was interested to see how was Nebraska going to bounce back from this loss to Illinois. That was so much of a focus for this team, and I think a big thing that set the tone. We were watching during the pregame. Matt Rule getting the players together there during the pregame warm-up period, got them together, a very physical drill. I think at the time I called it an Oklahoma drill. It's the bull in the ring. Sorry, I haven't played. It's been a while since I played.
Oklahoma drill is outlawed.
Yeah, I know, right? There'd be an issue if that was going on before the game. But bull in the ring, just two guys getting low, getting physical. Interesting to see and something that Matt Rule has done in the past too. Not in Nebraska, but in the past in his coaching career.
Yeah, it's been a while. I believe he did it at Temple. Gotten fired up. Before what was a very boring half.
Yeah, right. Got him fired up to play 38 minutes of scoreless football. So really interesting. I think the way that first half played out. I mean, the offense, they moved the ball. But when it just got to that, 30-yard line range, it was like everything just stalled out.
Yeah. And, it would have been different had some kicks went in, but they didn't.
Yeah. And the field goal miscues, it was snap to hold the kick. There was a lot for Nebraska to look, had a lot to change. John Holt did miss that first field goal. The snaps were poor. Aiden Fleeg, Campton Watucky, they both got their opportunity to snap. Didn't change anything. And this is a Nebraska team that is now 4 for 9 on field goals this season.
Just stop kicking.
I mean, you got to put it under consideration.
I love special teams. I am a defender of special teams. I believe that it is a very important game-changing part of football. I wanted to rip my hair out on Saturday, watching those snaps, watching some of the gunners on some crucial plays. I'm losing my mind. Watching what should be a strength be a weakness.
Yeah, it's great special teams play is fun to watch. The opposite, not so much. And certainly a lot of points, a lot of missed opportunities left out there by this Nebraska team. And I think we were talking about it too. I mean, you get to a point where this happens once, twice, 3 times. It's like you cannot send him back out there in that game unless it was like you had to, down 3. It's the only possible move.
But is it the only possible move? Granted, I will say that the 2 blocked field goals were not John's fault. However, you can't expect his like mentals to be right after that. Like getting blocked like does something to your brain. So hopefully he can shake it off. But just watching two kicks in a row get blocked, even when it's not your fault, can't be great for confidence.
Well, yeah, I mean, you just think that unit needs to be in rhythm, right? They got to have that timing down, practice to the millisecond, obviously. I mean, that's such an important thing. When that snaps off, that just, it's going to throw everything off there. And it's a new week. They'll have time in practice to reset, but something to watch for that moving forward, that special teams unit. But offensively, they did figure it out there in that second half. Dylan Raiola led 3 consecutive touchdown drives. Thought he threw the ball pretty well in that one. But really the standout, Ja'Cory Barney, found his way into the end zone. Man, he's always fun to watch.
Man, and he would have so many more yards if like half of his plays hadn't like come back this season on penalties.
Yeah, no kidding. And the way that they use him too, it's just always getting that speed to the edge, and two, even when they don't give him the ball, running that motion, that makes defenses nervous.
It does, because as has been shown on tape, it burns people.
Yeah. And another guy who burned the Purdue defense a little bit was Emmett Johnson. This running back rotation continues to look different every week. Dante Dowdell continuing to be kind of that early down guy early, but didn't get a lot of carries. Didn't do a whole lot with them, and Emmett was fantastic there in the second half.
Yeah, I genuinely have no idea what the right move is here. I feel like I've said that since the summer.
Yep.
Since the spring. I don't know. But it feels like you need to get Emmett more involved earlier. And I think they know that too.
Yeah, I think that changes this week. And they even had to play. Even Gabe Irvin got in there. He landed up at fullback, got in, and it was like, oh yeah, like they could get Gabe out here. I mean, he's hardly played this season. I believe about 8 snaps in the last 4 weeks, if I looked that up. So this running back rotation, we'll see what they do against Rutgers with that one. And also on offense, Gunnar Gatula making his first career start. Talk about a big moment, tough situation playing left tackle. And really, I mean, he was fantastic.
Yeah, we didn't notice him. And Matt Rule even gently called us out for that in post-game, saying, you didn't ask about Gunnar. I didn't notice him, and you didn't either. And he was right. We didn't, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, I'm sure Gunnar is happy that his name wasn't getting shouted out on the broadcast over and over again. So that was interesting to see, because, man, Purdue was going to target him. Matt Rule talked about a little bit after the game too, the way that the Boilermakers made some adjustments, move guys around. But offensive line, they handled that challenge, and the defense handled the challenge as well, because Illinois ran all over them at times. Expected Purdue to try to do the same, and really the Boilermakers could not run the ball against Nebraska.
No. And granted, some of the sacks changes that, right? But yeah, 50 yards.
Yeah.
Not too bad.
It was not the same Devin Mockabee, a great running back who'd had a couple big games. He was bottled up in a big way because of that Nebraska defense. And the rotations were interesting too. Tony White had talked about it a little bit during the week and the lead up to it, examining how many snaps they're putting on their starters. Well, they made a conscious effort, fewer snaps for the starters, keeping them fresh down the stretch.
And you need that, right? Especially as you think about not just the game, how long the games are, but how long the season is. We're not halfway yet.
Yeah. And some of the young defensive backs got in there. Jeremiah Charles played some very big snaps there. Cornerback was great to see a third quarter play. Marquise Buford covering guys next to each other. Mario Buford, that's a guy that this Nebraska team, they really expect him to potentially earn some more starting time. But as we mentioned, the defensive backs, got to mention Sia Wright, stepping up these last 2 weeks with Tommy Hill dealing with that foot injury, played some really big snaps last week.
Yeah, and I envision that continuing with the injury that Tommy Hill has. He is truly day to day. So many coaches say that, kind of gamesmanship a little bit. No, the plantar fascia that is on the bottom of your foot, and you can't pivot. You can't explode like you want to. You can't cut like you want to. Some days it feels fine. Some days it doesn't. And that's what Tommy is dealing with. And by the sounds of it, he felt fine earlier this week in practice, but that doesn't mean he's going to feel fine on Saturday. So Sierra's got to be ready to go at a moment's notice. And so far, so good in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, big for him to step up because Tommy Hill's out. You would say, hey, that's a position of need. He's really filled that void and done very well so far. And as we bring up one right, let's talk about another on defense. Javen Wright making his debut last week. I think everybody loved that from an emotional standpoint and from an on-field standpoint too.
Yeah, he played about 15 snaps or so. But the most wild thing about it is he hasn't been able to practice. So
just going out there, playing off field.
Yeah.
Gotta love it.
Playing off field.
Yeah.
He's been in every meeting. He's walked through some things, has been dialed in, has watched a lot of film. But yeah, can't be more excited for that guy. And it sounds like his role is going to continue to grow.
Yeah, definitely. And one other defensive player deserved to be spotlighted a little bit. Linebacker John Bullock, everybody saw the pick six, but continues to be crucial all game long. Defensive coordinator Tony White said he's playing at an all-conference level this week. I tend to agree with that.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. And one other topic from this Purdue game, the officiating continues to be something that people are talking about after the fact. Not just that it's, going against Nebraska, just that there's a lot of flags. There were a ton of flags in this one, 24 penalties for 259 yards. Thomas Fedoni, he got called for that offensive pass interference. If he did touch the guy, it was with a centimeter of his shoulder pad.
I almost swore. Complete crap. That's probably the worst call I've seen since being here. The phantom reach on CJ Wilcher against Purdue 2 years ago was bad.
Yep.
There's another one on CJ that was bad. Poor CJ. But that horrible.
Yeah, I mean that really, I think, illustrated, some of the issues. The game moves quick, but that was not. He got called for something that he didn't really do there. And then the other play that was really driving us crazy later in the game was Hudson Card. He threw a pass. He was about 2 yards beyond the line of scrimmage, and they deliberated for like 3 or 4 minutes of like real time. Eventually, it wasn't past the line of scrimmage, but there was a flag. I mean, it was just not a cohesive day for the officiating crew.
It's just like, and the official that ultimately made the call on that play was like nowhere near the play. Like the official who was right there, like was watching it, didn't.
No call.
I'm just like, you're on the line of scrimmage. What are you doing? Dude, bad day.
I imagine it was a lengthy review for the Big Ten officials this week. Turned on that game film. Probably a lot of calls submitted to the conference for them to look at.
And they made a lot of right calls. They did, but I'm very, very concerned about just like what they're looking for, what they're looking at, their positioning, whether or not they make the right call or not. The job is really hard. Like, I understand that. I wouldn't want to do it. Several games that we've watched this season, the officials have just like completely lost control of the game.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's very worrying, definitely. One other update for you for the Nebraska football team personnel-wise. Offensive lineman Micah Mazuka, he was out for that Purdue game. Matt Rule clarifying that he was suspended for that game, will be reinstated to the team this week. But Henry Lutovsky's done a really good job at that right guard spot, and he's keeping that starting spot.
Yeah. Again, like with Gunner, nobody's really noticed him, which is what you want.
Status quo is good for the offensive line. And I thought I think the offensive line, I think that's been a pretty consistent position group. And that brings us to our Husker hot topic for the day. Almost to the midpoint season for this Nebraska football team. And looking at this position by position, not every group that we thought was going to be at their best is maybe shaken out that way. There's been some surprises too. But our question for today, which position group do you think has been the most consistent this season?
I'm going to say quarterback's the obvious one, but I'm going to go with the offensive line. Granted, the end of the Illinois game, not great for anyone. But also, of course, Illinois is going to blitz you. that's the way that goes. But overall, I'd say the offensive line, not a ton of sacks that have been their fault. Dylan's danced very, very long on some of those, and sacks aren't always an offensive line issue. Yeah, I'm going to go with that.
Yeah, I think the offensive line is definitely a fair answer for this one. Like I said, they have been very consistent, but since you didn't say him, I'll say it. I'll say quarterback, Dylan Raiola and Heinrich, and a little bit of Jalen football too, there earlier in the season. But just really, I think the level of quarterback play, I think everybody knew that Dylan was going to come in and elevate this offense, but what he's done has been so impressive that, as Matt Rule has mentioned a couple times, like, you forget he's a freshman, like, he's still playing, like his first 5-6 games of college football, makes all the adjustments, all the throws, all the reads, and continues to put this Nebraska offense in positions to succeed. And the way that they've gotten Heinrich Haarberg on the field, I know it's not obviously the main thing that you're looking for in that quarterback position, but me and you, they had that one play, they lined him up, almost split backs in the backfield. It's like, come on, we keep calling for more Heinrich on this podcast.
Yes.
And we'll continue.
Yes. But yeah, to piggyback off of that, again, you look at Dylan's stats. Yes, he has 2 interceptions. Neither one of those are his fault. He's been completing passes at a really high percentage. I believe he's a leading freshman quarterbacks in completion percentage this season. So,
yeah, one of the top guys in the country too in that metric. So, doing a really good job, consistency out of that quarterback position. And Nebraska's going to need it this week. Let's move into the scouting report for the upcoming opponent, Rutgers. They come into this matchup 4-0 for the first time since 2012. And early on, beat Howard, beat Akron. It was like, okay, how good really is this team? 3-point win over Virginia Tech. Thought, looking pretty good. 3-point win over Washington. Like, all right, this is a pretty good Rutgers team.
Yeah, and Rutgers was expected to be pretty decent. Their schedule was pretty favorable. The Washington game was one that I was really interested in, just because, yes, Washington lost a lot of people, but they're still a really good team. How does that look for them once again on a Friday night, right? Yeah, all things considered, looked pretty good.
Yeah, that was an impressive one. And health-wise, by the way, they're very healthy at the moment. Just a few backups who were on the injury report last week. The one notable one, linebacker Mohamed Toure, one of the top edge rusher impact guys for them. He's out for the year with an ACL tear. But really, this Rutgers team offensively, a name some of you might recognize, Athan Kaliak-Manis, played for Minnesota last year, but really wasn't too much of a passer for Minnesota, has really improved that side of his game. 7 touchdowns to 1 INT this year, can scramble too. So he's going to be a big contributor for them, maybe like 150, 200 yards through the air, something along those lines. But it's really the running game. Kyle Monangai, 6.1 yards per carry, gone over 100 in 3 of his 4 games this year, 6 rushing touchdowns. He's been fantastic. In the backup, Samuel Brown, he gets, 6-8 carries a game. He is really good too.
Yeah, this is the part of the game that worries me the most. Nebraska's run defense has been pretty good up until this point, but how do you handle this guy? Tony White waxed poetic about what he could do. He never goes down on first contact. Got to be able to wrap him up. But yeah, that's the aspect of the game that worries me the most.
Yeah, they can run him inside. They can run him outside. They can do all sorts with Monangai. He's fantastic. But the pass game, as I did mention, is probably not the strong suit of this offense. And coming into the year, that was really a concern for them. Who's going to step up at wide receiver? They got a big FCS transfer, Dymere Miller. He's a senior, catches a lot of passes for him. And a big guy, 6'3", Ian Strong. Those are the 2 wideouts that they can look for. Tight end, Kenny Fletcher. He makes an impact too. But really, you kind of see it reflected, but it's kind of a game that as you look at it, you expect to kind of be played in the 20s.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Just because for me, I look at just how good Rutgers' red zone defense has been. It's like insane, actually.
Yeah, and that's how Washington lost the game last week. That they, I think they had about 270 more yards of offense than Rutgers did. They went over 500 on the day. kind of a bend but don't break type defense. Also excellent on third downs, fourth downs against Rutgers. Rutgers was against Washington there in that recent one. And this Rutgers defense, it's interesting too, the way it's shaken out. The defensive line they thought was maybe going to be a big impact group. Aaron Lewis, one of the leaders of that group, not quite made the impact they expected. They're allowing 172.8 rushing yards per game, also only 4 sacks, so not been a prolific pass rushing team. But on the other hand, their secondary has been very good. Some playmakers at safety. They do a good job disguising the coverages, moving those guys around. It's going to be a challenge for Dylan Raiola to throw the ball against this team.
Yeah, I would expect lots of it's going to be a chess game. I think it wouldn't surprise me if there's some checkdowns involved, just with what Rutgers is able to do on the back end.
Yeah, and also a really good special teams unit, kind of a hallmark of a Greg Schiano coach team there on the top 25 in efficiency. Nebraska near the bottom in that mark nationally. But let's get into our game predictions. I thought it was interesting. Nebraska currently 7-point favorites. After, watching the way that they struggled to move the ball or to score the ball, they moved it pretty well against Purdue last week. That feels a little bit large to me.
Yeah, I agree. I don't like it. I don't like it at all.
Yeah. Well, I still do think Nebraska gets the job done. I thought about, it's like, is this going to be a real nail biter? I think, yeah, it's going to be close. It's going to be a 1-score game. I'm going Nebraska 24, Rutgers 20. Probably my bold prediction there is that they're going to kick a field goal and they're going to make it. That's the part of the 24 field goal.
Okay. I say 21-20, Nebraska.
Yeah. I think it's close, but I think that they get enough on the ground. I think Dylan probably throws a touchdown or two, does enough to lead that offense down the field. And I think the Nebraska defense will get some big stops as well.
Yeah, I think so too. I think Rutgers kicks a couple field goals.
Yeah.
But they don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. They've not been a prolific field goal kicking team, but they do have a veteran senior kicker who can expect to be very good for them. But as we get into the final word, one thing we're watching for, the penalties, that's something I'm watching for again. Can Nebraska play a clean game? None of the holdings, the false starts, some of the simple things that they can clean up. And again, the ground game, can they get it going? No 100-yard rusher yet this season. Don't think that's going to change this week, but Dante Dowdell, Ramir Johnson, Emma Johnson, what happens with those guys?
Yeah, it's a good question. For me, which defense wins out? Both defenses are pretty good. And can Nebraska snap cleanly?
Yeah. Defenses, that's probably the story of the game right there.
I like to think so.
Yeah. Big Ten football. But yet, as we get into October, have you seen the forecast? It's going to be in the 90s.
I'm ready for fall.
Yep.
As evidenced by me wearing a hoodie type situation right now. I'm ready for fall. And yet, nope. It'll be a golf skirt and t-shirt type of game.
Absolutely. And I thought Greg Schiano in his press conference this week said, oh yeah, Matt Rule knew what he was doing in getting that team to move sidelines, because Rutgers, they'll be in the sun at least for a couple hours before the Memorial Stadium blocks that facade, blocks that sun there on Saturday. But 3 p.m. game, Rutgers coming to town, big one for Nebraska, heading into that midpoint of their season and to the bye week. We'll see what shakes out when Rutgers comes to Memorial Stadium. As always, we'll have the coverage of that game for you at journalstar.com. But that'll do it for today's episode of the Life in the Red podcast. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to this week's Life in the Red podcast. Our theme music is composed by Sasha Indy. The stories continue on journalstar.com.